Finding Strength podcast is sponsored by Avantacool.
Avantacool.
Yeah, cold plunges. Who's surprised? We got a cold plunge sponsor. Yeah. I met Jeff Rempfer at a first responder conference not too long ago. He and his brother Dave are the owners, and Jeff's a first responder guy. They are killing it. They're this amazing cold plunges. We just got one put in at our house. How do you like it?
I love it, actually. I mean, it's
Game changer, huh?
It is a game changer, especially from coming from a horse trough?
Horse trough.
That's what we've been using.
It worked.
Hey,
it
did. It worked. It was great. I love it.
But it
I
doesn't
love
have a UV filter, freaking regular filter. This thing has a hot tub filter.
Yeah, it goes hot and cold. It's amazing.
It goes to 104 degrees and then all the way down to
45 degrees.
30s. Into the high 30s is what they'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy good stuff. We love it.
You don't need to go that low to get the benefits.
Yeah, low 40s is actually really what you need.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. 45 degrees, 3 minutes, and then get me out.
And then get you out. Yeah, we love it. But the main things that our sponsor wants us to highlight is that it's got an all aluminum frame. It's light, easy to move around. We put it up on our deck. You're able to get it up the stairs and stuff like that.
Installing it was the easiest thing. Like that was the easiest part, was installing it. I was surprised. We took it up a flight of stairs onto our deck, and it was not that hard. Yeah. I was surprised how light it was.
Right.
And then even like filling it up. How was that for you?
Super easy.
Yeah.
Really easy to use. I absolutely love this thing. It's got this huge pump in it, so it gets cold really quick and it can heat up really quick as well. And the best part, most hot tubs use like a 220 cables. You have to direct line in.
Oh, yeah.
This thing uses 110. You just plug it into your regular friggin' outlet and you're ready to go. Another amazing benefit. If you use the code STRENGTH24, you will get 25% off.
25% off. That's amazing.
Amazing. They're hooking us up. They really love the cause. We love them. We couldn't be more grateful to these guys for sponsoring the show. So if you need a cold plunge, Avantacool. That is AVANTIKUL.com.
Avantacool.
Finding Strength podcast. We're back.
We're back.
It's time
for another one.
Dude,
we just recorded one, so it's like, wait, we're back
again?
Yeah,
we recorded one this morning.
Yeah.
That'll probably release before this. So hopefully you guys go back and check that out. Episode on mood disorders and depression. Hopefully that was really helpful for you. I'm very excited for you guys to hear it. Check it out. But today, oh shit, I'm so excited.
Mood disorders and depression. What an intro.
Speaking of mood disorders.
Yeah, my opener is depression. That's me. Fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the house, we have the mastermind behind Comedy Church.
Yes.
There he is. Yep. Adam Broud.
Praise be.
Praise be. We'll talk about what Comedy Church is in a little bit.
Yeah.
Fair warning.
But you guys go way back.
We go way back.
We go way back. Yeah,
We're going to do fair warning before.
Best boss I ever had. This guy.
There you go.
That's 100% true. I tell people that to this day.
Really?
1,000%
Because we became like freaking super friends. Dude.
Also true.
Awesome.
But you were a great boss.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That was fun. We go back to the Telos days. But I do want to give a shout out and a warning to people who might want to turn this off. If you're easily offended, this episode I don't know where it's going to go.
I was going to say easily offended with what topics. Yeah.
Well, I want to give you free reign to talk about whatever the fuck you want to talk about.
Appreciate that.
And we're going to start off with an F-bomb.
So if you don't like swear words,
can recognize that this is going to can divert away from maybe some of our safer episodes.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to talk about hard things
and laugh about it.
We're going to talk about religion today, specifically the LDS faith. And I would imagine this might get into some stuff that may be sensitive for people. And if that's okay. And so just warning. And there you go.
Warning. There you go.
We're going to swap some handshakes. That's what we're doing.
And we just lost a couple people, and that's okay.
Allow me to start off by saying,
I'm getting a little
fuck
sweaty.
God.
Oh my God.
just joking. It's fine if you're religious. I'm not.
Here's
That's
the
whole
thing. I think one way of like coping with like stuff like trauma is laughing about it sometimes. Like
Definitely.
you have to laugh. You have to laugh
that's
about
what
it.
common
I hope
church
that's
is.
true.
Yeah. I hope that's true.
You guys bring me on the show to teach me my whole lifestyle's just toxic. I walk out a broken man listening to your depression episode instead. So fun.
Oh shit.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
Can we talk more about how's your favorite boss real quick? Just
Oh,
Stop.
we totally could.
No.
You gave me the best advice that I ever received as an
oh
employee.
shit! Really? Let's go.
I've given it to so many other people, and I got an MBA, needlessly so, because now I'm a stand-up comedian. But so it's spread out like that. The best advice you ever gave me is you said, think of part of your job as being you need to brag to me about how good of a job you're doing, because I'm not going to be around you most of the time, and I want to trust you as much as I can, but I don't know how much I can if you're not the one who's telling me like the good things that you do. So lots of people bring me problems, and I get that. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
But you got to bring me your successes and genuinely think about it. Because if you brag about you, then I brag about you. And then people look at me and they're like, wow, Matt's doing a great job because Adam's doing such a great job.
I need some freaking material here.
And literally after that, I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. And ever since, yeah, it's been great advice. Just brag about yourself to your boss where it's like, hey, I did this thing and it was excellent. And they're like, wonderful to hear. Every boss I've ever had has been like, oh, that's so good to hear. Thank goodness you did that. It was great advice. Best
Well,
advice.
and I think in general, right? Like kids or parents or whatever
Yeah.
you're doing, like bring to the table your wins.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've
Yeah.
had to like learn how to do that recently. I feel like with my spouse of like bringing up to Lindsay like, oh, I did this thing and it was really good without feeling embarrassed. Where it's like, hey, I'm proud of things I do in life. Is that okay? Like,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good advice.
Because we're so
That is-
like,
that's cool.
well, I don't know how you were brought up, Adam, maybe a little bit, but I grew up in a world, in an environment, in a culture, in a societal upbringing where it's like if you come on scene and you're coming in talking about successes, wins, whatever, you're prideful.
Sure. Yeah.
Not only prideful, like maybe even boastful, maybe even overconfident. Now we got this new term that's come on the scene, right? You hear everybody and their mom now is married to a narcissist. I don't know if you know this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone's
Everyone's
all of a
a
sudden
narcissist.
there's just narcissists
What
everywhere.
happened to the assholes? When we just called people assholes, we didn't have to clinicalize it. It was that guy's asshole. Oh, I don't know. He's kind of, is he like borderline narcissist? I don't know what he is. He's just kind of an asshole. That's all it is.
It's true. But now you can't even talk about yourself without being a narcissist.
Yeah. It's true.
Or whatever. And
It's a tricky balance where it is
Yeah.
like, where does arrogance begin and where does just like, yeah, because I want at the same time, I mean, you reverse that. And I think easily, if I think about Lindsay, if she did something great at work, and then she came home and I like never learned about it. And then her coworkers told me about it. Like the flip side, I would feel kind of
yes,
offended where I'd be like,
yes.
wait a sec, why don't I get to know about those things, right?
Yeah, I like
Well said,
that
man.
perspective.
Well,
yeah.
hey, you know, I got some great advice apparently. I don't know.
I know I was gonna say, do you remember saying that?
I do,
Oh,
actually.
that's cool. Yeah.
I learned that because as I was working with the guys above me, right, who, you know, Mosier and all those guys who were like really hard to work for. I read that in a book and I was like, I better start doing this because they kept coming to me with all these problems and telling me all the stuff that we weren't doing right. And I'm like going like, dude, we're freaking killing it.
Yeah.
We're like, things are going really well down here, but you guys are not seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. How is this? Where's this discrepancy? So I started doing that and I started telling people that.
Smart.
And it didn't work. I mean, they fired me eventually, but still.
Worked occasionally.
I know.
There you go.
I love it. Oh my
But
gosh.
that whole era was a very important era for me. I learned a ton in that time.
You grew
period.
a lot.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
we were parents to teenagers that their parents couldn't handle them.
Yeah.
Control's not a good word, but handle
Yeah.
them, right?
Well, and we were allowed to kind of just do whatever we wanted.
Yeah. Very limited oversight.
You too? Oh shit.
It was so fun.
We really could.
It was so fun.
I know.
Well,
The check and balance was each other.
to be honest, the reason we worked well together as well is because I felt like you were one of the few realists who worked there. Because there were these people who would sit on one side of things where they would be like, well, everything needs to go perfectly. Otherwise it's proof these kids are dysfunctional. And I'm like, have you ever been a child before?
Yeah.
Like, let's get real. Things should go wrong, and it's what do you do
A lot.
after the fact?
Exactly.
That's what
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of that, I remember, at this, I don't know, I was like 23, raising teenagers is what it felt like, as well as raising other 20-somethings who were trying to get this really hard job done. And I wasn't always the most, I don't know, especially if you come from situations where you feel like you've maybe been through shit before.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose that empathy, and
Yeah.
I lost it sometimes for other people would be like, it's just so hard to work here sometimes, and I have to like go through all this, right? And I'd be like, yeah, but then other times you have to realize like you get paid to go skateboard, right?
Yes.
And like we saw a movie today
Yeah.
and we got paid hourly for it.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's actually pretty cool
great.
when you think about that part
Yeah.
and stuff. And I felt like, like me and you, when I was like, oh, we're going to go to Goblin Valley or whatever. And you're like, oh, Goblin Valley, how come you're going there? That's going to be irritating. I'm like, no, just because I want to go to Goblin Valley. And you're like, oh, well, then great. That sounds super fun. That's so fun. So yeah, it was like good realism with it, which was good.
Yeah.
It was a really we learned a lot about each other, and I learned a lot about myself, about kids, about parenting.
Yeah.
I learned a lot now, looking back, because this is well over a decade ago at this point. Looking back, I learned a lot of what not to do. But at the time, thinking this is what I was supposed to do.
Oh, okay.
And that kind of self-reflection has really helped me a lot in understanding that, like, much of what was going on, I guess, kind of culturally within the telos kind of like
the way they ran
dogma
Yeah.
was
Not your thing.
very much kind of like fruits of this underlying belief system that governed the administration in a big way. And now, having left that particular faith practice that was the roots to the fruit, I can kind of see how I don't want to do that. And I don't want to be in the business of helping people to make a bunch of freaking money at all costs and have the dollar be the bottom line and be ruthless with personnel.
Yeah.
And kind of looking at people, even the clients, as cogs in a machine or as commodities in an organization to monetize. And that was kind of the hardest thing that I think, coming back, reflecting on my work in youth days, now that I work with a lot of adults, is realizing that the youth industry very much, and is viewed this way by a lot of people in mental health, very much takes advantage of a lot of these families that are extremely wealthy, that have no other options, and they charge these exorbitant amounts of money for taking kids to movies.
And then I got paid $7.25 an hour for it.
And they're making money.
We're making how much money here? Anyway.
Whoa.
Like that's my takeaway, as you're talking about, like, we shouldn't take advantage of people, and we also shouldn't get paid shit to do so. If you're going to take advantage of people, you should get paid well for it. Just the worst life lesson to learn.
Double taking advantage. They're smart.
Yeah.
There's room for self-reflection there.
Yeah.
Well, and the mental health industry is notorious for organizations monetizing underprivileged people.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about that, and I think that's lended really well to what I do now. So I look back on those times with like a lot of fondness, and I think that the time we spent together, dude.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Well,
definitely my favorite person I've ever worked with in that industry.
Oh, thank
hands
you.
down. Oh, dude, we had
It was so
so much fun
fun.
together.
It was so
It
good.
was a blast. Yeah.
Yeah. Your last thing that you said about like the monetization of underprivileged people, that did make me think of something. So I just had a show last night for Comedy Church, and we talked about.
We saw that, by the way. We were like, crap,
we have 30 minutes. Should we try and go?
Oh, that would've been good. Well, I talked about briefly. There was someone else on the stage. It was really interesting because both her and I had grown up in kind of similar situations. We're very poor and stuff like that. We both grew up in trailers, and so we were kind of like story swapping. But one of the things that came up was welfare services, and the amount of times that even welfare services are listed as like this extremely helpful sort of thing, but it's another job the way that the government runs it. Back in the day for the church, it was literally another job for that. You had to put in a certain amount of time volunteering for welfare services for you to qualify for welfare services, which became really difficult because then my mom's working 3 jobs, plus has to go volunteer at this place so that we can be fed, and then we would go volunteer as well. So I would literally be like stocking shelves with her at Walmart at night sometimes because we didn't have childcare or whatever. And then the next day we'd have to go volunteer at the church welfare services because we were like, well, we have to afford flour as well. And it was so weird because Walmart being like Walmart, like they would still be like, keep this on the down low that we've got children like working here sort of deal.
Yeah.
But the church, it was the opposite where they were like, isn't this nice that we're bringing your family together? And it's like, I don't know, I just want food.
I'm just
So it's so
hungry.
strange to me that even in retrospect that the company that's like vilified in so many ways or whatever was the one who was like, we should be embarrassed by our practices. Whereas the other one was like, but isn't this actually good? And I'm not saying that it's all bad. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously they've done some reformation themselves, which I think has been really good. But it is, I think it's important for anybody to just think about like, I don't know. It's easy to get to the ends justify the means sort of mentality, no matter where you get, and especially mental health or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mental health, religion, right? Service, the helping services.
Yeah.
It's very easy to make that hop, skip, and a jump to like, well, you know, in the end, we're helping people. So that means that we can charge these extremely exorbitant fees.
which really, you know, all you're becoming is a narcissist through it. Full circle.
Full circle.
That's a wrap. Close it out.
That's the training right there. That's how you close the loop on a freaking joke.
Happy to come. Glad that I could. 5 minutes.
So
Well, yeah. With
ahead.
that, I mean, let's take it back. Like, tell us a little bit of your background. Like, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How many?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in kind of two places, rural Ohio and rural Oregon.
Really? You're not from
Yeah.
Utah?
No.
I didn't know that.
No, I mean I've been here for a while
You
now.
have been here for a
though.
while, yeah.
Yeah, because I moved here for college because
Okay.
I grew up in a situation where people didn't really go to college at all.
Okay.
I had my mom was always like taking sort of side classes, always growing up, and I had an older sister who went to college for I think a year or whatever, but no one really went to college or knew how to get to college or anything like that. And so BYU was the option because the one thing I knew about it is that everybody constantly said it was affordable. And that was it.
And did you grow up LDS then?
I grew up LDS,
Okay.
so that was
So
the
you
one
knew
thing. Like
about it,
yeah. So
yeah.
at church, people would talk about BYU,
BYU
but
all the time.
I've never been
affordable.
much of like a sports person or anything like that. And
Okay.
so for living in these two states that are so far from BYU,
Yep.
there was no sense of like pride with it because I'm not watching the sports. I can't go visit. We were converts as well when I was a kid, so none of us had like I didn't have the whole like pioneer ancestry to bring
Okay.
me back to like I got to go to BYU because my great great grandmother was Brigham Young's 57th wife, and that's important. And so
She tracked
sort of
all the way
attitude.
over here, so I got to go there.
Yeah, some people took a walk one time, and now I'm stuck here. sort of attitude. Like I didn't have.
that's a good way to put it.
I do like
So
that.
just belittle our ancestors. No, so I didn't like have any of that or anything. What I did have was like the crushing fear of finances my whole life. Because I was working. I had my. We used to do stuff like one of my first jobs, I guess, was I mentioned stocking shelves for like Walmart to help my mom and stuff, but we also had like the city routes for newspapers where because there's the kids on bikes or whatever for neighborhoods, but there's also adults who have to like go fill all the they don't really have these anymore where you would put a quarter in and you'd pull out a newspaper and all that sort of stuff. So you got to fill those out, or like larger neighborhoods where you can't really bike, you got to drive around and stuff like that. So we had a 15-seater van, and I'm one of 5 kids, and us 3 older kids. We would be up at like 3 a.m. or something like that, folding newspapers, putting them in this giant van as the 2 younger kids slept in the very back. And so it's like, 3-4 a.m. I remember working until like dawn was kind of our limit because that's when all the old people start waking up.
How old were you at this time?
I was probably like 8 or something like that.
Wow.
So like 8 years old, working a job at like 4 a.m., running newspapers around as old people come out and they're like, "You're late." And I'm like, "I'm so sorry." And really they should have been like, "This is uncomfortable. Why is this happening?"
You're 8 years
sort of
old. You should be
situation.
asleep.
Yeah, so I've always like worked doing that, and then I had a job all through high school, and I had to like pay for my own clothes and stuff like that as a
Okay.
teenager, and so it was always viewed as like our this happens a lot in just like Appalachia. I don't know if you guys have spent much time out there. They've done studies about how people in kind of that Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia area, which is where all my family's from, everyone comes from like the Highlands of Scotland and like Ireland and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
And they've maintained a lot of that almost seemingly tribalistic mentality. And I would say my family is very much so that, where it was like, hey, you're in this family, it's your responsibility to keep it afloat at all costs, sort of thing. So it also wasn't viewed as like this insane thing that I would be working at 8 years old. It was viewed a little bit more of like a, oh, you guys must need money. Of course the 8-year-old's working.
Yeah.
Sort of deal.
That's
like
just what you do.
That's the next step.
Yeah.
If you didn't need it,
There was
then
a
you
potato
wouldn't
famine
do it.
once. We know how to get through that.
Yeah.
So let's
It's
It's like
Exactly.
surviving. You're surviving.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've always kind of had that like sense of or this responsibility towards finances and stuff like
Okay.
that. So BYU was mostly just viewed as like, I guess this is probably the only option for like a poor kid like me.
Because it's affordable.
Because it's affordable, and the only thing I knew about college and high school and stuff was just people always talking about how expensive it was, you know. And I didn't have any. I couldn't like ask my parents like, "What's college like?" Because they would be like, "Great question."
I don't know. Well, yeah. Yeah.
So
Could be cool. Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm not originally from here. Ohio, rural Oregon as well. Grew up, Ohio first, then Oregon was kind of my teenage years.
Okay.
So growing up in Ohio, like I said, rural. My dad was in the military for a while, and then he kind of stopped doing that, and he kind of jumped job to job for a bit. Kind of found something for a little while as well, where it was making really good money. But I love my dad. He's a bit of an odd duck as well. And he is a bit of a narcissist. So even when we had that money, it all kind of went to him. It didn't really go to the family.
Okay.
So it was very strange seeing like the presentation of money at some points in time, while at the same time being told by that same father, like, hey, you can't invite people over to the house because they'll have to eat the food. And if they eat the food, what are your sisters going to eat? And I'm like 10 years old being like, oh, I would hate to be responsible for not having my sisters eat food. Like, that's my fault.
10.
Sort of thing. Yeah. And now in retrospect, I'm like, or maybe, Dad, you shouldn't be throwing a bunch of work parties needlessly with your own money.
Yeah.
And you should feed your children.
yeah.
I don't want to sound crazy, but here's an idea, sort of thing. So anyway, grew up rural out there. Both my parents, they married very young.
Okay.
My mom had my oldest brother when she was 16, so she's only known motherhood. She has the hardest life of anyone that I've ever met in my life, like literally. She grew up in a family where my grandma had extreme schizophrenia and would like chase her with knives around the house and all sorts of stuff. It was crazy. Yeah. And so for her to grow up in a family where it was like she never knew love, and then she's suddenly raising a child to teach it something she'd never had. I like saw my mom grow up with us. Because she brought up just the other day, she is, let's see, my dad's 25 years older than me, so my mom is 22 years older than me.
Okay.
So when I was in high school, 16 years old, that would have made her 38. Is that right? And I was her third kid who would have been going in high school at the time. So she talks about my older brother all the time, where she's like, he was 15 years old asking me all these life questions. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm 30.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to anything
That is so
in life.
Like,
you know, shit at
she's
30.
like, I'm still trying to live. She's like, I'm continuing living my life. I don't know. I'm only 30 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I'm 35.
How many siblings did you have?
I'm one of 5.
5.
Yeah.
And you're
Okay.
number 3, you said?
I'm number 3. I'm in the middle.
Right in the
3 of
middle.
5.
Yeah, and so I think about it all the time. Where I'm 35 and I'm doing stand-up comedy. Like most of my peers are 23-year-olds, sort of thing, and I don't know if they've just never seen someone as old as me before. But many times they're like, "I thought you were like 27." I'm like, "No, I'm 35," and they're like, "Huh, gross." I'm like, "Yeah, kind of. Yeah, kind of feels that way." To
Good
be
material
honest.
for later.
So yeah, it's horrific. Anyway,
So you're the pedophile in all the friggin'
That's what it is. Yeah.
sketches.
Well, literally. Well, it's so funny. There's this new guy to stand up. We were sitting, and he was like asking me for advice and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. We're all struggling, man. Just give it your best shot. Anyway, some guy goes on stage, and he was probably like 35. And he in his stand up set, he starts it with like, so I banged a 23-year-old the other day, and that's how he worded it. And sitting there, I just go, ugh, gross. For multiple reasons. I'm like, 35, you're bragging about banging. That is Like, don't do that.
Don't brag about that.
Don't brag, like, don't word it in any way. I think, like, I banged it, whatever. Don't do that. But, like, secondarily, like, to be like, and she was young. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So anyway, so I said gross, and then this guy was like, gross? What do you mean? How old are you? And I was like, 35. He's like, that is gross. I was like, and you're 23, I assume? He's like, I'm 23. I'm like, there you go. There you go. And you're still trying to talk with me. No, just joking. Anyway, sorry. Back to Ohio. So I felt like, so growing up, so kind of this dad who was very like self-involved, and this mom who was trying to grow up and dealing with a husband who's so self-involved and always trying to like raise people around her while still having kids. Like one of my formative memories, this was in Oregon actually. I was 12 years old, and my mom had picked me up from, I think it was like a friend's house or whatever. But basically by the time that I was like 11, I just scheduled my own life for the most part and just like did what I was supposed to, took care of my life. My parents didn't really need to do like a whole lot for me. So by 12, my mom had kind of been commenting on it. And then finally she like sat me down and she was like, so here's the thing. I have 2 male children that I'm raising already. Your father and your brother. Because my brother had some pretty extreme like drug issues and stuff where he was using like heroin and things like that growing up. And there I was, just like Mormon kid who had his day planned out.
You're scheduled out, yeah.
Yeah, and so 12 years old, I remember her being like, I can only raise 2 men at a time. It is time to grow up, and I need you to be an adult from here on out. That's how we're gonna.
Pressure on a kid.
That's how we're gonna think. It was pressure. It was also relief in some ways, where I was just like, well, that's nice that I don't have to deal with the craziness at home, sort of thing. But you know, if my own son, who's 5, if he was 12, and if he told me like, oh, it's great that I have to deal with you a little less because it makes my life more stressful, like I would be like,
ouch.
Good son. Oh, good, right?
Yeah.
And like I recognize in retrospect that my mom was just dealing with a ton, but a lot of pressure to put on a 12-year-old
kid.
right?
I mean, that's got to feel a little abandoned-y, right? I mean,
yeah, it was tough to feel as if it was like separate. And my parents would always come back. Well, not always, but they would come back to me and they would say things where it was like, "Hey, like this is the family. You're always out on your own doing your own thing. Like." Here's the family. You need to stick around. And it got to a point in my teenage years, I'm like, stick around for what?
For what? Yeah.
We
dysfunction?
Yeah, we either veg out and watch TV so that no one's arguing, or we turn off the TV and you guys are immediately screaming at each other. What am I supposed to do? Yeah. And I was always labeled as like the peacemaker and stuff in my family. But I feel like another part of that was just because drama happened. Adam was involved because Adam would be like, man, I really got a skateboard right now, you know? That's what I need to do instead. But yeah, so all that sort of pressure. I mean, where religion kind of comes into it, I think, because part of this podcast is also using things to like what helped you overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And I will say, like the positive part for religion is it gave me a semblance of control in moments where I did not have it as a child, right? Yeah. Which childhood is like, well, I guess I should be careful with this. It's terrifying when you're going through it. Like, it's so fun. But I think people forget sometimes, like, how scary it is to be a kid.
Yes.
That you're just constantly dropped off at places and, like, given new challenges every single day, constantly. School, everything is learning. Yep. Like, it's astounding to me how humble kids are that I told my kid the other day when he was, like, sobbing over what felt like nothing. I was like, we're going to try to work on resiliency. And he goes, I don't know what resiliency means. And I was like, oh, that's an ironic sentence, buddy. Like, that's so fun of you to say.
Brilliant, man.
Yeah.
Mouths of babes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to be so humble that in his like moment of despair, he's like still asking, like, can I get some assistance in understanding what this language is?
Yeah.
Like, he's already being challenged in life. And then here I am throwing words at him that are like, well, you know what the solution is to your problems? It's and he's like, well, that doesn't help in the slightest. So it's so great. Anyway, I said that I should be careful because I've said that to some people in the past where I'm like, well, you know how childhood's like this amazing, wonderful, magical thing where you're learning so much stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's lightning bugs, there's bugs that their butts glow in the dark. What an amazing world. And then at the same time, it's like this scary, terrifying place where you have so little control over your life and things feel so big.
Yep.
And for me, what religion did was, I don't have a single memory of my parents not fighting. No, that's not true. There's one memory of it, and it's when we overheard them having sex. But outside of that, it sounded like fighting a little bit anyway. So it's just like, what's all the grunts? But they were always just like yelling and fighting. And what Mormonism does, and I think this was helpful in some ways, damaging later in life. It was helpful where Mormonism tries to do this thing where it's like, if you do X, Y, and Z, it's very like delineated, right? Where it's like, these are the prescripted things you should do. Pray 5 times a day and you will feel joy in your life, sort of like prescription.
Yeah.
And so as a kid, it was nice because I think anytime that I heard things breaking, I heard people shouting, I heard all that craziness happening downstairs, I could be in my room and I could pull out the scriptures and be like, hey, but I'm safe. There's another person who loves me, who's in the world, who loves my family, who doesn't want this. And by me making the sacrifice, it's going to somehow prove to this cosmic deity that my family is worthwhile, and then they're going to give me life lessons that are going to help me like change my family. And I wouldn't say that was wrong all the time.
No,
like there were
yeah,
several things in
yeah.
religion that my family did learn through it about patience and love and sacrifice that did help us view the world in a certain way that made us more caring to one another. And so I think it was really good seeking out that higher power, which is why I think even after leaving religion, I'm still cool with people
Yes.
believing in a God, because I'm like,
Yeah.
I have felt the empowerment from it myself
Yeah, you can
in
see what
powerless
it does.
situations.
Yeah.
And when you get these people who
Yeah.
like, I'm assuming you still do a lot of work in addiction recovery as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
where people like that, where talk about a situation where you feel like you're absolutely powerless and there's
Yeah.
no more that you can do. Yeah, sometimes the hope you need is like,
God
well,
or something.
got something that is more powerful than what you can comprehend, right?
Yeah.
I think the problem
Yeah.
for my religion was it puts God into this box where it's like very comprehensible,
Yeah.
while at the same time like putting a lot of ownership on the individual.
Yeah.
But that being said, it was still helpful in different ways.
How old were you when you guys converted?
Oh, I was super young. I was like, I think it was 4 when my
Okay.
dad got baptized. Yeah, and
So you
I
went straight into being a sunbeam.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw that. I very much so saw the missionaries as like the saviors to our family. Like I used to, I like asked for a suit. I would dress up as a missionary for career day. I would dress as a missionary. Always wanted to be a
It's
missionary.
like
It wasn't.
saving grace.
Yeah, it wasn't until later in life that I was
Okay.
like, oh yeah, I just saw that as like, oh, this is a moment where people have come into my house and they've promised happiness.
Yeah.
And I don't think I like knew it as a kid, but I was like, oh yeah, that's lacking here.
Yeah.
And they've promised it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I wanted to do. If it had been the Catholic Church that would have done that, I would have been dressing up as a nun. No, that would have been fun. I would have been dressing up as like a priest or whatever. Which anyway. We'll keep it clean a little bit, relatively.
Do that now. I've seen your picture on your thing.
I changed it to that recently. That's fun, huh? That's fun.
I do want to say one thing that I like to kind of like, to
Just
relate.
do your rant. Go. Yeah,
Right.
I'm kidding.
to relate, what I've realized is that I have bits as a therapist.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You have to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of my bits that I do is the bit about confusion. And I think the primary operating state of humanness is confusion.
Oh, that's the base reality? That's fun. It's very like low-key God.
But if you think about childhood, there's so
Constant confusion.
much confusion, right?
Yeah.
And we're walking around.
that or we're just like dumbasses. That's I want to say to the viewers, maybe there's someone watching, they're like, not everybody's confused, buddy.
I would beg to differ
Yeah.
and say that if you think you're not confused, you probably
You're more
are
confused than
masking
anybody else.
something.
Yeah, there you go.
Because the whole point is to be like in this experiential thing where you're learning stuff.
Yeah.
And so your initial response to most things is like, oh no. Like, what now? What do I do? Where do
Yeah.
I go? How? What? When? Where? Why? And it's this initial confusion thing.
Yeah.
And so what religiosity does, what society does, what these, the socially constructed, organized things do, school, religion, culture, societal norms, family origin, government, what these things end up doing is they end up answering the questions that arise out of the primary normal state of confusion
Of life, right?
Like, where do we go after we die?
Yeah.
The religion's going to answer that one.
Yeah.
Where do I give all this extra money that I could use myself, but I got to pay for roads? Government answers that question, right?
Yeah.
And I think that being more okay with confusion is a good thing. And what children are brilliant at, that we could get better at as adults, is being okay with confusion, because they don't really see it as confusion. They see it as curiosity and openness and learning. And the story you tell about your son is brilliant, because he's like in this blubbery state of like vulnerability, and he's confused. He's like, I don't know what to do, Dad. And what does he do? He turns to curiosity and says, well, what does this mean? And here's the problem with these large, powerful organizations. They can take advantage of that very easily with vulnerable populations.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Because if you're poor or you're underprivileged, or you got some disadvantage, whatever, it's very easy for these organizations to come in and kind of say, oh, actually, you don't need to find the answers. You don't even need to ask questions, because we have all the answers. So stop asking your questions. Here's a bunch of answers, and this will answer all the questions. In fact, actually, we're going to tell you which questions you can and can't ask, which is my favorite part, right? Because there are questions you're not supposed to ask. Those are too big. Nope.
Yeah.
We're not going to go into curiosity. We're just going to answer all your questions for you, because being confused is bad.
Yeah.
But I think being confused is normal and good and fine. But if you can take confusion and turn it into curiosity, that's where you begin to learn about yourself, about life, about growth, about happiness.
Yeah.
And so there's one of my bits, confusion to curiosity.
Yeah, I like
what do you
that.
think?
I like it. I think, I think secondary, the word that kept coming back to that was just action and taking actionable steps after any sort of confusion, things like that, which, removing even like the deity part of religion, I think that was a powerful and important lesson, where it was like, oh, things are happening that you don't like. Well, what actions can you take? And even if now in retrospect, I'm like, okay, I feel now that I'm like, oh, I was choosing actions that weren't really like actually correlated with the problem that was going on. But at the very least, training my brain to be like, oh, there is a problem. Okay, what is within my control that I'm able to go to?
And you're making those decisions based off of the information that you have up to that point.
Yeah. And as a child,
as a child.
well, when I was a child, I thought of it as a child. If you want to quote scripture in this moment, but very much so. And now, like growing up, I'm like, oh yeah, well, I've got a lot more control. And I'm now married, and we run the house.
Yes.
Well, neither Lindsay nor I have ever yelled at each other, and I think a big part of it for me is because I've seen what yelling does. And I'm like, oh, well, that's never going to be the solution for me, because it's not a good solution for anyone, it feels like.
You didn't see a solution from it.
Yeah.
You didn't see it. So you're like, what's the point of yelling then?
Why would I if it's not going to be the outcome?
Yeah.
Which is the thing, well, the other thing of working at Telos, I think probably the biggest lesson I learned out of working there was always thinking towards, like, immediately going towards, well, what is the end result that I want to see? And then trying to work a little bit backwards from there. Because, yelling and screaming usually just ends in escalation, which there's been moments in my life that I do want escalation as the end all, like for performing or on stage, where it's like, what I want is I want everyone to feel amped up. So I'm going to bring the energy. I'm going to do this stuff. But spousal issues isn't the moment that I want escalation, most likely. So...
Very wise.
Might feel cathartic, maybe. I don't know. I've never tried it. You know what? You guys convinced me. I'm going to go scream at my wife. It's just a reverse therapy podcast.
Sure, why not?
No, we are not sending you home to your sweet wife.
Just joking.
She's
She's great.
does not deserve to get yelled at.
No.
We yell at each other on
She can
occasion.
yell at you. You can yell at Adam.
No, she can't.
We yell at each
I'm a
other.
sweet boy. It would hurt me too bad.
We don't yell at each other near as much as we used to.
No.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that was a major form of communication.
That was our
for a while.
relationship, was yelling.
Oh, really?
Well, that's that. I think that paints it with like this one color brush. There was so much.
There
to
was
it.
so much
There
to
was
it,
so
for
much.
sure. There's a reason why I was always yelling.
In moments of emotionality, our response was to add more emotion.
Yeah.
And that does not work well.
No, it doesn't. Like,
Well, I think it all depends. I have a buddy who he talks about how his wife, she She has a lot of emotional issues and she has a difficulty in expressing them. And one of the things that she tends to do is until she reaches an emotional breaking point, she like can't find space for herself to talk. And he's a comedian friend. He's very funny and he's very chill and he's like this happy, fun guy. So what he has taken to doing, and this is not advice for anyone else's relationship, but it strangely works for him, is she'll start getting worked up and she can't communicate it, so he'll grab a plate and he just breaks it. And every time it happens, she's like, oh, thank God. Okay, yes, we can talk about it now. Because it feels like we can't get more escalated than
that,
breaking. And he doesn't do it in like anger or anything like that. He does it more so with a message where it's like, break everything. I don't give a shit what you do to these things. We got to figure this out.
He
so like
creates a safety.
You mean it's
for
not
her.
a passive
so do I.
aggressive like stare where he just drops the plate?
He's literally like, you want to break one? We don't give a shit. Let's just talk about
break
it.
some plates.
And it's like,
I like it.
So, but that is another thing that, like, obviously, if Lindsay did that, where she's like, "Well, you want to break plates?" I would be like, like all my childhood trauma would like come back, and I'd be like, "This is why would you ever do this to me?" Like, it would be such an opposite. But you know, you're
it works for some people.
Yeah, you're trying to find the interpretation. I think that's where Lindsay and I sit. Where I can't see any circumstance where either of us would be like, "Oh yeah, the catharsis or the communication through yelling like somehow helped." It's just it doesn't work with either of our pasts or childhood, you know.
Yeah.
So
that's wonderful.
But but just that kind of learning how to take action, I do think is a principle that I've kept with me for a lot of my life. When I was doing my MBA is kind of when I started doing more stand up as well.
Because so you go to BYU,
Yeah.
and then we hang out at Telos for how long were you there? 5 years, 6?
Well, wait, how old were you
4
when you
years?
moved here?
When I moved here,
Yeah.
it was right after my mission, so I was
Okay, so you
21.
did go on a mission then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brazil.
Oh, Brazil. So you know Portuguese?
Yes, scene.
Scene.
So you say yes. So there you go.
There you go.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then BYU,
Mm-hmm.
and then I remember you
Went to Florida. Is that what it is?
Oh yeah, because you were gonna go do.
I did a PhD. Did a year of
psychology.
PhD.
Okay.
So I was like, "Fuck this." No way.
Yeah,
No way,
I
dude.
remember. I don't know if you did a post about that or something. I had heard about that, or maybe even I don't know. We might have been talking still then.
Well,
More
that was
often than
another choice in action. I went out there a little unsure, and that felt like a big step to move all the way to Florida, where literally monsters roam the earth, just alligators all over the place.
What city in Florida were you in?
Tampa,
Tampa.
which I loved.
yeah.
Honestly, I loved the city, but making a choice like that, where I'm like, I think this is what I want, and my decision there was, I was like, I'm going to give it my all for the first year, and then I'm going to evaluate because I think at that point I felt. Because I'd always been as a kid, it was always like, well, you need to check all the boxes that people have given you. And at least that point where people were like, hey, it's a 4-year commitment. And I was like, it's a commitment for as long as I want it, to be honest. Like, I'm always just me. So,
Yeah.
So I was
that's always been you, though. I love that.
Oh, you
about
think?
you. First, well,
that's
at least
good to hear.
at
From
least
how you've met him.
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever. It didn't seem like you were really worried about making other people think of you a certain way.
Yeah.
Because you were kind of cool with just being.
Who he was, yeah.
Yeah, I do think I've always kind of had that. Honestly, I think a lot of that just comes from being a poor kid. When you like have to, when you show up in like thrift store clothes, when that's not an actual cool thing to do. Like
You just have to learn to like.
You have to
This is
learn
what
to
you
own
do.
it,
skin
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing?
people are like, your clothes look like they're from the 70s. I'm like, fucking smells like it too, dude. It's crazy. And they're like, okay. Like, I guess he's fine.
He's fine with
sort of
it,
attitude.
yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, what else am I
So
supposed
that's
to do
like
with this
maybe even an
sort of
origin
thing?
story for your
For
sense of
his
humor a little
comedy,
bit.
yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to fit in. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think a fair amount of my comedy as well is like saying the things that I feel like people are thinking in maybe a bolder way than they would word it.
Yes.
But when I say it, they're like, jeez. Yeah,
It makes
but
sense, yeah.
jeez, but yeah, sort
I
of
said it
thing.
in my head, but you said it out loud.
Oh,
Damn.
Well,
And
and
I
that's kind of hot in comedy right now too, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
stylistically, like to
Yeah,
be
you
like
got people out there.
like the edgy, taking it
Please
to
don't
the
call it edgy. Please don't call it edgy.
or whatever. What's the word? What the word that you would use? Because a lot of the hot comedy right now that seems to be popular is people that are pushing boundaries. And
Well,
that's
they
kind of
say hard
always been
things.
I think
They
that's
say
always
hard
been
things.
it.
Yeah.
I think it's always been it. I think what we're seeing in comedy is we had for a little bit this like you guys watched the Nanette special of I can't remember her name all of a sudden. Hannah Gadsby's Nanette. Have you seen
I don't
that?
think
You
I
should
saw
watch
that.
that.
No.
It's a very like therapy sort of vibe
Is
to
it edgy?
Oh, cool.
It's not.
Oh,
It is,
okay.
but it is very.
just
It's very much so this like comedy with a message, and I think we went through this phase where a lot of like high art comedy was done with a message,
Yes.
and then Bo Burnham came out with Inside, and everyone was like, "Pack it up." He did it.
Yeah.
He did as much
Brilliant.
of that thing as anyone can do.
And it was also like a freaking commentary on comedy in and of
Yeah.
itself. That
It
it
was
was
phenomenal.
little, too big for its own britches. And,
Yes.
oh my gosh, that was
Yes.
unbelievable. Bo Burnham is
And
super
so
genius.
after that point, I think now you've got a lot of stuff where it's like, well, where are we going? And then you got people like Shane Gillis, who I think does a great job of doing stuff where it's like, maybe comedy doesn't need to prove anything.
I'm just gonna make fun of Trump for an hour and a half and see if people laugh.
And,
He does a great job.
and make fun of like I mean,
Of
he's
everybody.
He's like, I'm going to make fun of Trump, and then I'm also going to talk about how I'm a closeted Republican sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like he is just a guy on stage. And there's as many like articles as I've read about Shane Gillis where it's like, well, what he's trying to say is, I'm like, I think he said what he was
Just
trying to
to say what
say.
he's saying.
He's just like, that's just my style. So I think we see this. I think we're coming off of what felt like such a clear, this is what people are trying to do in comedy. And then we hit like Bo Burnham accomplished it. That now people are like, well, what's the next thing? And I think you get mixed in some of these like edgy for the sake of edgy sort of comedians.
Yes.
Anthony Jeselnik had a great thing where he quoted, what's his name? The dude who painted tomato soup cans and all that.
Andy Kaufman.
No, not Kaufman, but
Oh.
Andy Warhol. There you
Warhol.
go.
Warhol, not Kaufman. That's
Yeah,
Jim
who's-
Any
Carrey
of
guy.
these
Never
people.
mind.
Who said
Warhol.
that art is something like art is the act of getting away with it, and which is a great quote coming from that guy, right?
Yeah.
Where of course you can imagine someone being like, "Yeah, you're painting tomato cans, dude," and he's like, "And I got away with it. That's art." Like people hung it in a museum, and they're like, "Well, that doesn't prove it's art," and he's like, "Actually,
That's
it
exactly
does."
what it proves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so Anthony Jeselnik, he talked about how there's all these new comedians who they're like out there saying these things with the intent to not get away with it because algorithms are based off of interaction, and a great way to get people to interact is controversy. And so you get these guys who are up there and it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels like a statement that's controversial, but they've got a mic in front of them. So they're like, it's just a joke, bro. And then it just does all this shit and it's terrible.
But it gets him.
Yeah.
I got some views. It
Clicks
drives
and
me
views
nuts
and
because for me, I'm like, I've dedicated my life to jokes at this point. Like they
Yeah.
mean so much to me
Yeah.
that to hear people make statements
Yeah.
and try to like, but I'm like, be a demotivational speaker, dude. Don't fuck with my art. Get out of here.
Well, and
Get out of here.
I have this insane appreciation. We've even talked about it. We used to talk about this when we were at Telos. Stand up.
Yeah.
Because I always thought you were really funny. And at the time, I don't even know. I vaguely remember having conversations about you maybe even toying with this idea or whatever.
I think I was doing improv at the time, probably.
Yeah, and maybe you had even done some stand up. And
Yeah,
you
I
were like,
definitely
I don't
had.
know if that would be like a career or whatever. But I always just
Yeah.
remember thinking, like, if anybody could do it, you could do it.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Well, and,
Thank you.
not wrong.
Well,
by the way.
I mean, growing up in a situation where everyone was like, "No, you work in the mines, kid," sort of
Yes.
attitude, right? Like
Well,
the
you
idea
go
of
freaking-
writer comedy that's not an option.
And you go to PhD clinical psychology school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you get an MBA.
Yeah.
And now you're like, well,
But you know
maybe
what's
I just
so
want
funny?
to talk on stage and make people laugh.
Yeah.
I fucking love everything about that.
Well, you know what's so
Yeah.
funny about it? It really was trying to learn to break away from like structure and the
Yes.
finally
Yeah.
understanding like the higher up I went in stuff. Because I get very dedicated to things I do. I feel like I put a lot of energy into the things that I love, to the point where, I was going to say this earlier. While at BYU, there was a friend who also did stand up, and she was like, you always talked about all the things that you did, and I always assumed you were just lying. And then I saw them happen, and I was like, oh, he's bipolar. And then I hung out with you enough, and I'm like, I guess he just is really good at getting shit done. I don't know how to do this.
It's just manic, not bipolar.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
Passionate.
constant
It's
manic
passionate.
episodes.
Passion.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Birds of a feather, bro.
Yeah.
I don't stop either.
Yeah,
Why? Why
yeah.
stop?
Why stop?
Yeah.
And so I feel like I dedicate myself a lot, which means that a lot of times I've been pretty successful in what I put my mind to. But then when you start moving up in almost any organization, the more you realize like no one has any idea what's going on anywhere. Everyone's
Yep.
making up everything. It is amazing that anything stands as an organization because any organization is people being like, I'll be there. Like that's all it is.
Yeah.
And all it takes for it to break down is someone to be like, maybe I won't show up. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, there goes the whole thing.
Yes.
Like it all just
Yeah.
fell apart. And so
That's so simple.
it's so simple.
That's
All
a
it-
really beautiful
It
way
is.
But it's
to look
true.
at
It's
work
literally just
and
showing up.
creativity in general.
Well, I think now I think of it all the time because that's
Yeah.
literally what my job is making people show up to a thing to hear me
Yeah.
talk.
Hear-
And that's
yeah.
like the whole deal
Yeah.
is most of the work is just getting people to show up. And when it comes down to it, I'm like, well, it's not really that much different from any sort of like boss scenario. It's just that
True.
we've ingrained in ourselves that it's like, well, this is a commitment that I cannot break. And it's like, truth be told, you can break any commitment you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
It just depends on how much you want to keep it.
Keep it, yeah.
And so I kept moving up and I was like, oh, I'm doing more schooling. I'm doing all these jobs that are asking a lot of me and I'm being promised these things, but no one ever had any sort of answers and everyone was making up. And at the same time, just dipping my toes into comedy, the more offers I got to do more of it until it reached a point that I was like, I can't do both these things and compete. Like I can't put enough time into comedy and be really good at it by only like halfway going, and I can't halfway go over here and kind of work and still compete in the office and all that sort of stuff. So I needed to choose one eventually, and yeah, I'm glad that it was comedy. I'm making more money in comedy than I ever did in business, and I think the whole reason is just because it's like, oh yeah, I truly love it,
Yeah.
and
What was that
Well,
moment like?
super
go ahead.
super
Go ahead.
good
No,
at it.
well, I was just gonna
super good at it. Please watch my videos.
He really
super
is. He's
good.
so funny. But no, what I love what you said there that stood out to me is that nobody knows what they're doing.
Nobody does.
And I think once you make that realization in your head,
Yeah.
it takes so much pressure away.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, oh, okay, I can create my own thing. I'm gonna go into comedy and do
Yeah.
my thing. And it's like you're like almost aligning up like your body, your soul, and everything. And like you go and you do it. And now like you're have a following and
Yeah.
like you're passionate about it. You love your job.
I
like
love it so
life-
much.
Yeah, it's
And
so cool.
And it's so crazy to me that like I'm able to do this thing that I love and I appreciate when people are like, oh, and it's so important. And then I'm always like, but is it? Like it's not. It's all
Yeah.
right. But,
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, when I think of sometimes the places that I've worked, like working at Pepsi in a factory and the amount that like those factory workers knew about the machinery and about all these things that, I mean, they're feeding America,
Yeah.
you know? And I know that I said Pepsi and people are probably like, well, not that food. But like, who doesn't like soda or water or whatever?
Pepsi
But-
owns a lot of stuff that's not just Pepsi.
and a lot of that
Sure
as well.
they do, yeah.
And these people knew so much, and then talking to like the higher ups who knew so little about some of that stuff. But it's the higher ups who are the ones getting to make up all the stuff as it goes along,
Oh,
while all
yeah.
the grunt workers are the ones who are like, it's so stupid. We do it this way. It should be done this other way. And I'm like, you're 100% right.
Right,
And
yeah.
God, I wish you were in charge
Yeah,
instead.
yeah.
And then it got to a point where it's like, oh yeah, I guess I could be in charge of just me.
Which
Why
is
not?
Awesome.
Why
Yeah,
not?
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
amazing.
Having that. What question were you gonna ask?
I was gonna ask, what was that moment like where you're like, I'm gonna freaking be a comedian now?
like deciding.
Yeah. So I was working at a place that I'm under an NDA that I cannot say why I was let go from that job. So I can't say why, but I can give you the information for what was going on around it, and then you can make your own inferences that I won't make for you.
I love it.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, that is fun.
So at this place, they had a parental leave policy where I was supposed to, where it was non-gender specific, and so any primary caregiver was supposed to get 2 months of parental leave. And so before Lindsay had ever gotten pregnant, I like double checked with them. I was like, so I'm a guy, so this I can qualify for this because I do most of the childcare in my house and all that. And they're like, yep, that would totally qualify. Lindsay got pregnant, came time for the birth, I'd been talking for months with my immediate supervisor about it. But then it finally came time for me to turn in the paperwork about it. Did that. They decided to change the whole, all the rules and make it gender specified instead. They brought me into the
Interesting.
office.
Convenient.
They told me that I had misinterpreted what was previously written. I showed them the documents that I had that showed, well, actually, I didn't misinterpret because I asked you specifically and you did agree. They read it and they said, okay, it does look like you have documentation to prove this, so we will give you the 2-month leave. They gave me the 2-month leave. The day that I came back, they fired me. Because they no longer had any room for my position at the office, is what they said. And so they needed to do a restructure. And then they gave it about 8 months, and then they filled that position again because the position suddenly became valid again. So who knows why they let me go? It's a mystery. It's a mystery
such a
as to why it could be. So I'll leave it up to you to interpret. The reason that they gave was there's a restructure for it. So after that, so that was a job
do
that,
people do
the
that?
person who had hired me was someone who I like knew well and had performed with and things like that. Good guy, considered him a friend. And this was after second kid, bought a house, moved back from Arizona to take this job, made financial sacrifices, made personal sacrifices, was working my ass off at this job to like really make it work. And it was just kind of the final plug where I was like, you know, even when you're doing all the things in the safe route, it's only as safe as the people you're riding in the car with decide it to be. And if the person who's in the
love
driver's
that.
seat isn't you and they decide, actually, I love hitting telephone poles, favorite way to drive, you fucked. And so,
Yep.
and so I just learned, I was like, you know what? I've gotten to a point that there's enough promise with comedy that I'm going to at least entertain it. We needed a bit more of like a financial bedrock still. So I was kind of poking around at jobs, but I knew that I didn't want to take any job that I didn't feel passionate about. And I only applied to 2 jobs and both gave me offers. And I was like, I should have been searching for jobs like this the whole time. But one of them was very cool, but it was a consulting job for medical devices.
Oh, cool.
And you basically like, it was very cool where you talk to these people, you analyze their data, which I enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
You get to build a story about their company and then you just present it to them, and that's
is
the whole
cool.
job.
That is
Someone
cool.
gives you
Yeah.
their information, you tell them what their story is back to them, and then tell them how they can improve their company.
Yeah.
And you get to fly out and do these presentations. I was like, if there's any job for me in
Yeah.
business, it's
Yeah.
probably this one, honestly.
Yeah. That sounds like a job you could do, creating something and making
Yeah.
it for some. Yeah. that's
Yeah,
cool.
and then just
Yeah.
like chatting.
Yep.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
And then the second job that I got was writing comedic ads. And so it was basically like sketch, but with products that you've got to throw in. And it paid like half as much as that other job. But Lindsay and I talked, and I was like, here's the deal. This job feels really easy, though. And so not only is it comedy, I bet I can do other stuff on the side. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And I was able to dedicate more time into comedy. And it's just like the advice that I feel like lots of people say, where they're like, take your passion, give as much time to it as you can, and the more time you can give to that and cut away time from the things that you don't care about, make that switch as you can, and eventually you'll just do your passion. And so it was one of those things where I took a job, ended up doing that. That company had some problems a little bit further down the road, and they laid everybody off, basically. I now write for them still as a freelancer, but it's fine because it's just freed up more time for me to do more stuff with comedy. And so it's just been this like incremental thing of making that switch. It was scary though, because talk about all those like childhood memories of my dad jumping around job to job to job, and eventually having to settle for being a truck driver in Afghanistan. Like when I came back from my mission, my dad was over in the Middle East during a war. And I was like, this sucks. Like I don't, and so to suddenly make that step, like I still get anxiety about it, where I'm like, I don't want my sons to ever be in this place where suddenly it's like, why can't we do the things that I feel are normal and good? Why can't I be in the soccer team? Why can't I do these things? Why can't I go on the choir trip? And it's, because we don't have money for it. Like that's how I grew up, and I don't want my kids to ever have to have financial worries for the family.
Well, and
sort
I
of
think
thing.
even like bigger is like you're being such a good example of showing your kids, like, if you just follow your passion, Like if you really figure out what you love and you just kind of follow that, of course, you know, like you had to do the job there
You're
for a
getting
minute.
into one of my bits.
I
Keep
love
going.
it.
Keep going.
But I love it because like it shows that you're aligned with who you are and you're following, you know, the self, because you were born with everything you need to know what you need for Adam, right?
Yeah.
And so
Despite what organizations will sometimes tell you.
exactly. Yeah. For sure. And so like just being that example for them, like following dad, and he's following his passion and he's working hard along the way, but it works out to where like dad gets to do what he loves and make money doing it.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's so fun to hear Asher say when people are like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he's like, I want to be a joke teller. And people are like, I don't think that's a job. And they're like, my dad does that. And they're like, your dad's unemployed? Like, sort of like. But I also tell people, I mean, Lindsay works for Crumble Cookies. And so I've told people, I'm like, my wife makes cookies and I tell jokes. We're the least recession-stable family you've ever met in your
love
life.
it. So
It's
good.
a house of cards, but man, is it a good time.
Yes.
And we've both gone about, I mean, we've both put a lot of hard work to be able to do those things that we love. And that was a thing that I definitely never was taught growing up by teachers, by anybody, teachers, parents. No one ever told me. I always heard that there were these jobs that you could love or things you could do that you would love. And I mean, you grow up around a lot of poor people. Poor people only think about money. Poor people are sometimes labeled as these like lazy people. There's no one working harder than the person who's dead ass broke.
Yeah.
Like it is tough being poor.
agree.
Money is all you think about. So to hear all this thing where all success in whatever job you're going to do is dictated by how much money you make through it, because you don't have the parachute that rich kids do to like couch surf and find yourself as you're a musician because you can go back on the weekends to your house in the Hamptons or whatever, right? So being worried about that and all the adults being worried about that, I don't think they ever pitched this idea that there were these jobs that you could love, that you could have, because it didn't seem viable to them. But the second thing was nobody ever pointed out to me what it meant to have a passion wasn't just liking something, it's working towards it. And if you're one of those people who loves something that you're also willing to like work hard towards, you can do a lot more than most people who say they want to do that. The amount of people who tell me when I say that I do stand-up, and they're like, you know, I'm kind of a funny guy myself. I've thought about doing stand-up. And then I'm like, have you ever tried it? And they're like, no, I bet I could though. I'm like, fuck you. No, you can't.
No, you can't. I know. I hate
You
when
haven't
people
even
say
taken the
that.
first step.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Yeah, no.
As if I'm going to like step into their job and be like, what are you? You're an electrician? I bet I could electrify myself. And that's about it. I'm not going to step in and try to do their job.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, you know, people kind of make it out to be that. But I wish that I would have had like my parents used to have to ground me sometimes from reading books because I read to the point of like I wasn't doing anything else. Like that's how much I read. And then when they would ground me from books, I would start writing. And so I would like write these stories. One of my formative memories was being in like I think it was first grade. It must have been first grade it must have been second grade because first grade teacher was nice. And this teacher wasn't nice. Second grade, we were told to write a 1-page story and I wrote a 15-page story. And second grade, and you're not writing anything that long in second grade typically.
Holy cow.
I was like writing plays in high school for fun with my friends. We were making movies, doing all this stuff. I started doing stand-up when I was in high school. I had a buddy, Andy Henselman, who he and I, every weekend, we would watch like the Comedy Central Presents specials and SNL and Conan O'Brien religiously, separate. And then we'd come back at school and we would like analyze it together where we would be like, did you see this? Did you see this sketch? It was funny because of this. This is what happened. And no one ever like had the eye to be like, hey, I just want to let you know, you're like fucking weird. Just to let you know about comedy. Like lots of people like it, but not like this.
Like,
that's like a weird level of enjoyment. So you might be able to do this. Like people, sure, it's hard to be a writer, but the hardest part about being a writer is most people aren't taking their free time to go try to write books. Hard to be a filmmaker because most people aren't willing to make the sacrifice to write a 90-page script that you're then filming with your friends. Like that is really different. You should pursue it. Yeah. And that's something that I'm trying to teach my kids because I don't know what it'll be for them. Who knows? Like maybe Milo, my 2-year-old, will turn 4 and he'll open up his first spreadsheet and I'll be like, you got something, kid. You're going to be the greatest damn accountant this world's ever seen. I don't know what it's going to be. Yeah. But whatever they put their time to and whatever they want to put their time to, I want to emphasize to them like that is ultimately who you are and where you will likely find success in.
Yep.
You know, and
follow that.
yeah, and I don't feel like that was taught to me. It was
Yeah.
taught to me was you do the things that are fun when you're a kid, and then you eventually take on responsibilities.
You grow up and you don't do those things anymore, and you
Yeah.
go work somewhere.
Yeah.
9 to
There's
5.
a
Yeah.
prescribed list of supposed tos,
Yeah,
and you got to stay in the supposed to box. And even thinking about going out of the supposed to box, you're not going to make it.
yeah.
Why would you even try that?
And you're going to compete with people who do love the thing that you hate doing. I have met forklift drivers who they love forklift driving more than anything else. They do forklift tricks. They've got forklift shirts. They hang out with forklift drivers at forklift
love
bars.
it. I love
they
it.
love it.
Yeah.
It's their life. That's what they feel passionate about. If I think that I can somehow show up to a place and be like, well, I was told being a writer's hard, but I guess I'll be a forklift driver. I'm going to be the worst forklift driver you've ever seen. I'm not going to be able to compete. I'm going to be miserable. They're not going to want to work with me. I'm going to be the first person fired anyway. So why try so hard at the thing that you don't feel passionate about just to lose at that? Why not try the thing you're super passionate about and lose at that as well? If those are your two options, like if you're going to lose at something, at least lose at the thing that you're like, fun, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, fun time. Oh, good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is kind of where I'm at now. I'm like, this could all implode at any day. And I'm so happy with knowing that I'm like, I would
Good.
way
Yeah.
rather have this completely just dissolve around me and be like, all right, I guess I'll on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Than have to be at a job where suddenly I come back and thought I had security and I'm like, oh,
And boom, gone.
turns out I traded my life for lies. Now what? Now what?
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that before we wrap it up, that
Oh, yeah.
you get to talk about what you're doing right now.
Oh yeah,
And
thanks.
even especially, I would love like a little pitch on Comedy Church, just
Yeah.
so people kind of
Thank you.
understand what it is, because it's awesome. We've been a
is
bunch of
really
times.
awesome.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know if we went to the very first one. We went to one of the earliest ones, and it is a riot. It is
Thank you.
definitely a niche crowd.
Yeah.
Well, and especially I feel like for anyone who has left a religion, obviously we've left the LDS religion. It was very healing.
It's cathartic, man.
It's so nice hanging out with the well. Sometimes I tell people I'm like it does feel like church in a way, in the
yeah.
sense that it's like
it does.
you're
communal.
You're finally with a group of people that all speak the same language and have the
Yes.
same base understanding that you don't have to worry about.
Yes.
Which is tough as someone who anybody who isn't LDS and is living in Utah or doesn't even like I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, and feeling like I have to tiptoe around that with people even sometimes where it's like, I don't believe in God and I don't mean that as a threat.
Yeah.
Whatever that means
And
to
I'm
you.
not going to push it on you.
Yeah,
That's what
it's-
they get
it's
scared of that. They're like,
So
"Oh,
scared
you
of
don't
it
believe
where it's like, well, what are you trying to say about me for believing in it? That I'm an
Yes.
idiot? I'm like, no, I was an idiot for believing in it. You are a great person because
Yeah.
you're doing the best thing for you.
Yes. Yep.
It was the terrible thing for me, and I was so dumb for sticking around for so long because it was obvious how painful it was to me. You're not dumb because you're not me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So don't
Yeah.
judge
It's
yours
very
by me.
individualized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
But it is
individualized.
like church where it's just like everybody has the same base understanding. So I think it's like this sigh of relief. I love doing the show where it's like, oh, it's just nice to not have to explain anything and just like live.
Just do it.
It feels so good.
When's the next Comedy
Yeah.
Church?
We do it the first and third Sunday of every month.
First and third Sunday. That's
Yeah.
what
And right now
and
it's
where
at
at?
Blue
So we
Yeah.
just did the first Sunday, so it'll be on the third Sunday. We're gonna be swapping between Blue Jeans and then Redemption Bar and Grill will be like our main.
Oh, Redemption
Our
in
Harriman.
Harriman?
Oh,
Oh, sick. We
cool.
definitely want to go to
Yeah.
that.
So we'll
so-
start doing those on the first Sunday of the month. Will be at Redemption in Harriman. Third Sunday will be at Blue Jeans in downtown Salt Lake. And then we also travel around doing it and stuff. And I'm trying to do a lot more traveling this year with it. We just did St. George, trying to set up something in Boise.
we
Going
saw
to set
that
up
too.
something in Phoenix and Portland, probably in LA.
When you guys were getting looked at to get picked up too, right? For a while.
Yeah,
Did you go
we-
to New York and do an audition.
Yeah, we
for
flew to
them?
New York. We filmed 2 specials with Mint Comedy and
That's
stuff,
cool.
which was very fun.
That's
Yeah, it was
cool.
great.
Yeah, did they get picked
So-
up or is it still?
No, there's still. I mean, so Mint Comedy did pay for it, so it did stream through them. But as
that's
like a
cool.
constantly you can rewatch sort of thing.
Rather than like a series.
There's
or-
been a couple companies that have like shown interest, but then have decided against it.
It's kind
so
of
it's
niche,
still
right?
selling.
But I'm sure something will work out.
Less than you think. I mean, so much of comedy is like people learning about lives that they
Interesting. Yeah.
know nothing about, right? Like you get these
Yeah.
comedians. The first one who came to mind, Josh Blue, who he was
I know
more
Josh Blue.
he was more popular like probably a decade ago or something,
Yeah.
but he's still great and touring around, and he's got does he have? He's got cerebral palsy.
I think it's cerebral
and so a lot of his comedy is about that. And it's like, yeah, like I don't know about this. How fun to hear this guy talk about the challenges that he has that he knows aren't challenges for other people, but he can bring it up.
Well, case in point, Book of Mormon musical, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Which is
like
another
laughing,
thing. People are fascinated by
That's
Mormonism.
like freaking won a bunch of Tonys, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's so healing laughing.
But-
okay, but where can people follow you to
Yeah.
know where to go?
So at
watch you?
Comedy Church on most
Okay.
social media, with the exception of Instagram, which is at Comedy Church SLC.
Okay.
And then my personal stuff on all social media is just at Adam Broud. And I do stuff outside of religious comedy as well.
Yeah.
Hire me for corporate events. I do.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of clean comedy because, living in Utah, I used to host Dry Bar all the time and stuff like
okay.
that. And so, yeah, follow there. And then adambroud.com is where I put up the list of just everything that I'm doing
Okay.
comedy wise, but I also post about it on Instagram. Instagram's probably the best place to if you want to go see one of my shows.
That's
I
just
will
at Adam
definitely
Broud?
post it. Yep, at Adam Broud.
Benefits
of having a
We'll put a link in the show notes.
benefits of having a weird last name.
That's perfect.
Don't we know it?
Yeah,
Nobody
don't we
thinks
know
it.
it?
It's great.
And I mean, to give like quick little plug about my boy, like not only is he funny, like you're gonna learn stuff.
Yeah.
You're gonna have your mind kind of expanded because he's gonna push the limits on what it is that you think you know, which is brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Comedians, that's a good comedian does that. They make
Yes.
you
Thanks.
think.
Yep.
They make you question, and in the end, you're laughing so hard your face hurts, which is
So bad,
my
yeah.
experience with this human being so
thank
many
you.
times. And Comedy Church, I have to tell our first Comedy Church experience. We went just us.
Yeah.
Then it was so funny. We brought a dozen of our friends.
I think like 16
You guys brought
people.
so
we brought so
many.
many because we asked him, I think, to save us seats. And then
Yeah,
I was like,
felt
I feel terrible because he's like saving
well, they were
4
taking forever
rows.
to get there. But
Don't ever feel terrible for bringing people to a show.
and it
Please.
was, I think you were doing a taping too.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It was kind of
Yeah.
a dress rehearsal
Dress rehearsal
situation.
something.
And all our friends could not, they were crying.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It was not crying like sad crying, like
Yeah.
laughing crying, just to make sure. It was a good time. So definitely check that out.
Check it out.
It's really worth your time, and
It
follow
is.
Adam on the social. We couldn't thank you any more for being here, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me. Seriously.
Yeah.
I love you guys. This is so fun to be here.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Love you
this
too,
is
man.
fun. Yeah. Thanks.